I mentioned my Tribes, I mentioned my Diamond D's. Let's go to Outcast, late 90s. Now, we talked about the shiny suit era.
Yes.
And how we got, you know, things were, for me, I started getting a little jaded with that type of hip-hop. But, I mean, Outcast was putting their ankle in music during the 90s,
yes,
weren't
they were.
I mean, they were absolutely going off the chain. I remember specifically listening to Aquemini and thinking to myself, wow, these are the next dudes. Because I respected their first, what's the name of the first album?
Southern Playlistic Cadillac Music.
Okay. Roughly 1994. 94? Okay, yes. Great. Thanks. 1994, Southern Playlistic, awesome. And what about your Aliens?
Aliens came out in 1996.
1996.
Another, now that wasn't... Very good.
Let me tell you. Let me tell you about AT Aliens, though, for me. AT Aliens, I slept on that a little bit. Let me just admit.
Okay. I'm going to do your move. Is this how you do it?
Listen. I'm not going to be the hip-hop omnipotent one right now.
Okay.
Some things I do sleep on. And I can mention to you a few things I've slept on in hip-hop that's almost embarrassing. Wow. That's one of them. I did sleep on it. I got hip to that a little bit later. I did.
How do you sleep on elevators?
I don't know, because maybe I was in a different place.
Wow.
You know what I mean? I'm just saying, though. But what brought me, you know, I'm going to tell you, Aquemini brought me back to ATLs because I didn't realize how dope they were until I really listened to Aquemini was just such a well-produced album. Then I started, speaking of producer-driven albums, Organized Noise, which is their production crew. I was jocking their whole catalog after that, man, because their beats were just ridiculous. Especially they weren't your atypical Southern rappers. You know what I'm saying? Because I mean, they would rap. You could tell the difference about the way they rapped on some level. Although Andre 3000 is one of the best rappers, period. So slept on to me when you talk about great MCs. I think he's off the chain.
I don't think he slept on.
You know, but when people start talking about the best MCs out there, I don't hear his name coming up quite as much. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, I get your point.
You know what I mean? But that Organized Noise, that whole catalog, everybody that had that type of production, Goody Mob, that dude, what's that dude? Cool Breeze, remember Cool Breeze?
I remember Cool Breeze.
You know that everything that had a production, they just it was just absolutely crazy with that. Aquemini for me was an absolute. In fact, you could argue if we were to do a show on our best albums of the '90s, I would have to nominate Aquemini being in there. I would have to nominate that being one of the albums, for sure.
I mean, funny you say that because I would say the same thing about AT Aliens. I mean, but Aquemini is a great album. Don't get me wrong. But AT Aliens, I mean, just Elevators alone. I mean, you hear that boom. Doom,
yeah.
Doom. Oh, probably one of the greatest verses ever is Andre 3000's great. The second verse talking about, you know, when he's sitting there talking to that dude.
Fastlane was my favorite song on AT Aliens.
Oh, okay, but. Oh, just an excellent album. I mean, when you talked about it, I just went down the list of that songs from that album, and I was just wow. That was a great album, and that's when actually Outcast. I mean, Outcast is such a great group because they were so dynamic, and not only did they put out great music, their videos were great, their outlook and everything. And Andre 3000 with the crazy dress. I mean, you knew they were expressing themselves on every aspect of it. I mean, the music, the dress, just the way they spoke and their interviews and everything. I mean, just a dynamic group.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm not going to go on it too much. I just wanted everybody to recognize Outcast.
Well, here's the thing. This is something that brings you to the point too. Was another important thing about the '90s was the regionalization of hip hop. Your Southern hip hop was your Southern hip hop had their one style of doing their hip hop. You had the West. And obviously the East. Right. I mean, Midwest wasn't even a discussion in the '90s like that, right? I mean, you had some MC, but you weren't. Everything was either East or West Coast.
Yeah. Well, So Def
So Def South.
They are South. I'm thinking of the Brat because she's from Chicago, right?
Right, but you consider that, And here's another. Speaking of that, one thing I hated about the Brat, since you brought it up, was the fact
what you hate about the Brat?
They try to make her out to be a female Snoop Dogg. Because if you look at So Functified, that video, it's like she trying to be a female Snoop Dogg. What is that? The movement's the whole night. Man, I don't want to digress. But anyways, regionalization of hip hop happened in the '90s. It was East Coast, West Coast, and the South. And I would even go so far to say that because of the East Coast, West Coast beef, which we're not going to go into great detail about right now, actually left the land fertile, hip hop fertile for Southern rappers to come up there and sneak in the game and get what they had to get. Your Master P, and they did it. And the thing about, I will give it to the Southern rappers, even though I didn't like all of the Southern raps music. they kind of introduced that whole thing about being independent hip hop artists.
Okay.
Because a lot of that stuff, they didn't go through the major record labels, get screwed like a lot of these. A lot of our favorite MCs got screwed with the major record labels. Master P did it his dang self. Baby himself from Cash Money, you know, which represents himself right now. They did it themselves. You know, when they got their own money, creating their own labels. You know what I'm saying? So they have to get props for that because they kind of showed rappers in general how to go and get this guap. Peace to Riley from Boondocks. How to get this guap by doing it yourself instead of getting 2 cents out of $10 on your CD, for instance. Okay. Now musically, I didn't like Master P. That was and that kind of brings me. Yeah, really, right? That kind of brings me to I got into this whole backpacker movement, man. Because in the late '90s, man, when that stuff was starting to get popular and stuff. I was still an Outcast guy, and I think we mentioned Stankonia being at the beginning of 2000, which is a very good album. But I think Stankonia was my Fear of a Black Planet. Although you could argue that Stankonia was Outcast really most popular album. You could argue that Stankonia because they had Miss Jackson was on there, certainly the most popular song, and it crossed over like big time by that time. But Stankonia wasn't the great. It was a very good album. So I don't mean it's whack, but I don't think it wasn't as strong to me as ATLians and Equimini. But yeah, I started getting to. I remember one of the 2 CDs I bought in the late '90s. Lyricist Lounge CD, which is a double CD, and also Sound Bombing 1, followed up by Sound Bombing 2. And I think I might have mentioned this on previous shows before how those CDs really changed how I looked at rap music. Okay. Or what I started listening to, because again, me being into Tribe Called Quest, I was longing for that sound because somewhere in the late '90s, that sound got lost. Whether it was just let me back up a little bit further. I could say that even in the early and mid '90s, I was big into Wu-Tang. Who wasn't? Wu-Tang was a great, prolific group, but. They started losing some steam in the late '90s too, just like everybody else did. You can only sustain things for so long. I mean, they put out the double CD in 1997. Wu-Tang did, but that should have been one tight classic CD as opposed to a double CD, which made it very good as opposed to being a classic in my opinion. But anyways, going back into that, I bought those CDs and I started getting into everything that LP made from Company Flow. The Def Jux, where you talked about Cannibal Ox and all this stuff. That made me into this whole backpacker because I saw some of the diversity in hip-hop that I thought was lacking in the late 90s start coming back again. The only difference was they started doing it through the underground and independent labels as opposed to everybody doing everything through majors.
It's funny that you asked that. When did Sound Bombing first come out? What year was that, the first Sound Bombing?
Sound Bombing, memory serves me correct, but it was about 98, 99.
98, 99?
Yep. Talib Kweli was on that Most Def. Company Flow, LP was on that. DJ Evil D from the Beat Miners, which is the production group from Black Moon, was on that. So.
Right. Yeah, I do remember that being a great album. And one of the things about Wu-Tang, you know what? We argued, I think, before about one of the greatest albums from Wu-Tang, and again from the 90s. I want to say, because we argued about this before, and I don't know if you ever resolved this, because you said that Cuban Links, you thought was the greatest album from Wu-Tang.
Arguably.
I mean, okay.
That now. I mean, as far as the solo albums are concerned, there's 3. I will put 3 albums as being the best. It would be GZA's Liquid Swords, Ghostface's Iron Man, and Only Built for Cuban Links by Raekwon. Only Built for Cuban Links by Raekwon might be the best album of the 3, but ever so slightly. And if anybody said, well, I like Ghostface better or I like GZA's better, I wouldn't argue against it.
Right. Okay. Well, you know what? See, the thing about the 90s, man, it's like I wasn't into the underground as much as you were. It's like I was just one of those guys who would always just like tape your best, and I did say tape your favorite songs on one cassette, and just keep on playing those, man. I was playing Onyx, Throw Your Guns all through the 90s, and I was playing Helter Skelter.
Mobb Deep's first album. Remember the second album?
Mobb Deep.
Think about that. Forgot about Mobb Deep, man. Come on. Mobb Deep, man. Not doing how to man, listen. You know what's funny? The reason why I just thought about that, because I was just recently listening to Big Noid's album. Let me tell you something really funny about that too. Okay. This is definitely off the, we didn't even prepare for this, but it's on my mind. Like my mom would have, in the 90s she'd have cable where you can play the radio stations and stuff all the way through. You can actually, and she had somehow she had her component set hooked to the TV, so you can like play like the hip hop station all the way through and just put your cassette in and let it go, right? All right. So it was this one joint that I always thought was by Mobb Deep, but I chased this one song all throughout the 90s and even the 2000 decade. There's one song that I thought was by Mobb Deep because Mobb Deep and Big Noid was on it. Now, I did at some point, I gave up on trying to find this one song, okay? And me trying to find this one song, hang on one second, guys. Yeah, I know what I like to do here. I like to go over here, and I like to try to get the one song that it is that I'm looking for. Okay, it was on Big Noid's episode of A Hustler. Now, I think I looked for every Big Noid album other than this one because it didn't seem, for some reason in my head, it didn't seem like that song would have been on this album. I don't know what I was thinking. Turns out that's what it was. And I had the title of the song wrong. Now, you know me, it's rare when I can't find something I really want, right? And what it was Recognize and Realize Part 2. That's what it was. Okay. And it was Big Noid featuring Mobb Deep. Okay. And big ups to Havoc from Mobb Deep. Havoc, I thought, man, had the quintessential 90s sound in that Mobb Deep music, man. You know, I mean, just that rugged. I mean, that's another classic album, Mobb Deep's. What's the name of the album? It's another Juvenile Hell. I keep calling it Shook One, but it wasn't called Shook One. No, it wasn't called Shook One. Survival of the Fittest. And it's something we should know. Yeah, it is something. I can't think of it right now. But correct us, and we apologize. Anyway, y'all know what we talk about. Anyway, we're gonna hear it. But anyway, I got one quick thing before we go. I got one last thing for you, especially you, because I mean, you said you were really deep into the backpacker thing and underground. I remember because I used to hang out with a bunch of people who were just like you in the late 90s. And I shouldn't say late 90s, but in the mid 90s and stuff like that. Now, these guys were not really so much into the whole bad boy thing. They thought Bad Boy was awful for hip-hop. They thought Biggie was awful for hip-hop. I mean, where did you stand on the whole thing when right before Biggie's passing? And I remember that, you know, we would all be hanging out and they'd be dissing Biggie. I mean, they would be dissing Biggie. For a lot of people, I thought, I'll speak, okay, let me answer your question directly for me. I didn't have as much a problem with them at all. I didn't have a problem with them. I thought they were prolific, but you know, I didn't like. Well, I wasn't as against the shiny suit era, but I mean, to me, the how can I put this? The songs kind of had a shelf life of. Okay, I put it this way. That whole movement was like simple carbs to me, sugar, simple carbs. Whereas, you know, like your Mobb Deeps. Your Pete Rock produced albums, that was like complex carbs to me. It was like longer lasting stuff to me, stuff I still listen to today. I'm not going back to the Bad Boy sound of the 90s. I won't listen to that today. But I will listen to Mobb Deep today. I will listen to Black Moon today. I will listen to Mecca and the Soul Brother even though that was early 90s. So it didn't have as much staying power, and I knew that even back then. But that said, I also understood, even though that music was really representing the hip-hop mainstream at that time, I had to recognize that Biggie Smalls was an absolutely prolific MC. He was. You could hear him. It's crazy. It's kind of like how I am with Jay-Z now. I wasn't a big Jay-Z fan back then when he first came out at all. In fact, in the early 2000s, I thought that Jay-Z represented a lot of what was wrong with hip-hop at that time, but now looking back on it, certainly looking at him right now, he is a great MC and one of the best MCs ever to touch a mic. So I don't know if that answers your question directly, but
kind of, sort of. Okay. But anyway, we're going to leave it at that, y'all. You know, I hope y'all enjoyed the discussion. Join us on the discussion. Hit us up on our email account, which is kidandmuff44@gmail.com. Don't forget to always hit us up on our Facebook account, which is Cipher Crew. Now, I always want to give a shout out to you guys, and thank you always. Thank you a million times for checking us out. And you know what? And joining the discussions and stuff like that, and loving hip hop the way we do. Yep. Peace, y'all. Peace. Why? Because the Cipher said so, son. Late.